Kyung-la, what are you experiencing right now? Kyung, can you hear me?
Sorry, it's a little confusing out here, Jake. It's a little confusing out here, Jake. You'll have to forgive me because what we're having out here is a hurricane. I mean, we're starting to see conditions worsen. Pretty much the last time that I was with you, it didn't feel quite as bad as this. It certainly feels a little bit worse now. It's a little bit harder to stand. It's hard to gauge what's happening with the trees because until they snap, we just don't know. What we have seen break off are street signs. We have not seen any major flooding here. And we do want to stress that if you are in Miami Beach, you are on your own. There is no more police and fire out here to help you, Jake.
All right, thank you so much, Kyung. As always, stay safe. We're going to turn now to CNN meteorologist Allison Chinchar. She's in the CNN Weather Center. And Allison, where's the storm now? Where's it headed?
All right, so it's officially made landfall over the Keys. It did so at 9:10 this morning. Now it's going back out over open water and very warm water, I should mention. So we don't expect this storm to really change much in the next couple of hours. Right now, still a Category 4 storm, 130-mile-per-hour winds. You can see some of those incredibly heavy rain bands, not just around Key West, but also the outer bands. Fort Pierce, Fort Lauderdale, even Fort Myers starting to pick up in some of those heavier bands of rain. Current winds, notice Key West. Nothing. That's because the station is broken. It stopped reporting after it likely took an incredibly high wind gust. Elsewhere, though, we're seeing 40, 45, 50, even 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts, and those are going to increase because the track is expected to take it up the west coast, heading towards Naples, Fort Myers, eventually into Tampa. Now, the one thing you will notice is we do expect it to eventually weaken by the time it gets to Tampa, so it's a slow weakening. However, once it gets to the Panhandle, it's going to encounter some shear, and that is going to rip that storm apart very quickly. So it goes from a 3 down to a 1, down to a tropical depression incredibly fast. The big story we've been talking to you about is the storm surge. Right now, the biggest storm surge is on the east coast side of Florida. All of that water is being pushed in from the strong winds. On the west coast side, it's entirely the opposite. The water is actually retreating. It's being pushed back out. You do not want to be on the beach when that water comes back. It comes back in fast and furious, and it can turn into a deadly situation incredibly fast. And it is going to come back as that storm makes its way north, crossing over the main peninsula. That water will come back in, and that, Jake, is when we're going to start to see some of the biggest storm surges for the west coast region of Florida.
And what's going to happen? We have obviously a lot of individuals, including our own Kyung-la, in Miami Beach right now. What's going to happen as the storm hits Florida to the areas of Miami and Miami Beach?
Right, so the current conditions that she is dealing with now are going to sustain that way for several hours before she finally starts to see conditions get a little bit better in Miami. And that's going to be for most people in Southeast Florida. It's going to remain bad for hours, and then it will finally begin to let up. Now, the rain bands will be off and on. You'll go from light showers to torrential downpours. But in terms of the winds, those are going to remain hurricane force gusts for quite some time. The west coast side, you're going to start to see conditions deteriorate rapidly over the coming hours, especially the folks in Tampa.
All right, Allison, thank you so much. And we're going to go back to CNN's Kyung-la. She's in Miami Beach. And Kyung, we're told the conditions where you are going to get worse. Are you able to detect that just on the ground? Kyung-la, I'm not sure if you can hear me. Let's go back to Allison Chinchar. Allison, in the Severe Weather Center, the storm it has made landfall, obviously, in Key West. It did so at 9:10 this morning, you said, and it's making itself up the west coast of Florida. There are a lot of individuals who fled southern Florida, 4 places upstate, that are now right in the eye of the storm.
Tampa being one of them. And unfortunately, what we've seen in the short term, the last couple of hours, is a shift in the track. Around Tampa, it's only a 14-mile difference. It no longer is expected to go right through downtown Tampa, but just about 14 miles west. And Jake, under normal circumstances, you would think that would be a good thing. Great. The main center is not going to go over downtown, but further west. The problem with that is it actually allows more of the storm surge to pile into Tampa Bay. So in theory, yes, your winds may not not be as strong as that center of circulation pushes further to the west, but it increases your chances for the storm surge and potentially the height of said storm surge as well.
All right, we're going to go now to Key Largo, Florida, where we find CNN's Bill Weir. Bill, you're in the upper Keys. The hurricane made landfall on the lower Keys at 9:10 a.m. Describe for us the conditions you're experiencing.
It's really a dramatic shift as the wind starts to whip around now. Actually, the Irma came ashore at the exact spot we did the last evacuation live shot on, I guess, Friday night, as people were really starting to head north on US 1 after so many admonitions from first responders and the authorities. Now, we actually had to move our position to the under end of this carport, so now we're facing Biscayne Bay, and this is where the sloppy, dirty side of the storm, as you talk about, will start to pick up. As an extra menace, we have a sign here that says "Caution, crocodiles in the area," a reminder of the biodiversity in this part of Florida. You know, you could, I guess, make a joke about a crocnado, but if that is the case, it would not be a threat. It would be, obviously, wildlife is as much risk here as human life, but we're checking in with our contacts that we've made over the last couple days around. We're hearing from people on the other side, on the Atlantic side of Key Largo, who are riding it out. They're losing tiki huts. They're seeing sheets of plywood blow around. No major boat damage. If you remember back to Hurricane Andrew, the way those boats were stacked like cordwood, nobody has seen that yet at this particular, thank goodness. But the big concern is what these big 110 mile an hour winds will do to the infrastructure in this part of the Keys. The ocean railroad that they built back in the 30s was taken out by a hurricane. People worry that if one of those bridges goes, it will cut off the Keys from the mainland for the unforeseeable future. They do have a desalination plant. They do have a power generation station that can give them maybe 60% of their peak power to tide them over to get things back normal. But it has really been, I think this is my 8th hurricane. I'm hardly a seasoned meteorology. We did Katrina together, did Ike and Gustav. This is the most violent I've ever seen, Jake.
Stay safe, Bill.
We will.
Joining us on the phone is Senator Marco Rubio. He's a Republican of Florida. Senator Rubio? Joining us on the phone right now from his home in Miami is Senator Marco Rubio, Republican of Florida. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. Hurricane Irma's destructive eye wall hit the Florida Keys just this morning. Do you have any sense of how bad it is down there in the Keys?
Well, I don't think anyone does at this point, because obviously there's not a lot of people there. Thankfully, they left. The ones that are, we're not in communication with. But we can just imagine, if you've ever been to the Keys, these are very narrow chain of islands, basically built on coral rock and coral reefs, and it's not going to be good, which is why we needed to get people out of there. We're deeply concerned about the storm is intensifying as the waters are over 90 degrees in the Caribbean basin, the Florida Straits, in that Gulf Stream and region. So we're concerned about it intensifying as it heads into southwest Florida, Naples, Fort Myers, Sarasota, Tampa Bay. I mean, that has always been our biggest fear, is a massive storm headed into that region, pushing all that water in there, plus the wind. We're deeply concerned about that. So, frankly, everybody in Florida needs to be taking precautions. The worst is yet to come for South and Southeast Florida, which is still facing bad storms. We haven't had power in my house here since 2 in the morning and so forth. But Southwest Florida, this is a very disturbing chain of events here, and we just pray for the best, and hopefully people have heeded the warnings and are hunkered down in a safe place.
You are in your home in Miami. Are you safe? Why did you decide to ride out the storm in your home?
Yeah. Well, first, I'm not in a flood zone. I'm not not on the coast. My home was built in 2005, so my roof is built to withstand a Category 3 storm, which we won't get the effects of in Miami, and my roof can withstand that as well. So we have shutters on the window and so forth. Now, a lot of people left South Florida, and some of them drove to Tampa and Orlando, and now they find themselves kind of in the eye of this thing, or certainly facing this thing down. And so that's one of the calculations we made. At this point, hopefully, those people who have left South Florida and have moved into those other communities in the state this is not a time for them to get on the road and try to head back. This is a time for them to have confidence, hopefully, in where they are and just stay in place and ride it out. But, you know, it was one of those storms where it wasn't easy to just move your family. There really wasn't anywhere in Florida that I could point to and say, if you go there, you're not going to see the storm. It's going to cover all of Florida. I know people that went to Georgia that are now figuring out how to get out of Georgia because it's headed in that direction.
Where are your wife and children?
They're here. I think the kids are still up there sleeping. You know, when you put shutters on your home, it's darker than ever, so it's a pretty good sleep, actually. It gets dark inside a house, so hopefully they'll... but we're going to be in this, you know, till tomorrow morning. I mean, that's the threat in South Florida, but it's just beginning for the rest of the state. But they're here, thankfully, and everyone's safe.
Senator Rubio, we're praying for you, your family, and all the citizens of Florida this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay with us. I'll be back in 2 hours, but CNN's breaking news coverage of Hurricane Irma continues right now.
This is CNN Breaking News.
If you are just joining our continuing coverage of Hurricane Irma, the hurricane has made landfall in the Florida Keys as a Category 4 storm. You will see on your screen what that means in terms of wind speed. The big concern, of course, is storm surge. The most deadly aspect of a hurricane is drowning. The water is the major concern. More than 600,000 people out of power already, and we have seen the least of the worst, and that's just in central and southern Florida. As this storm moves, the tally will only grow, but we are now at the beginning of the process. The Keys getting hammered, gusts well in excess of hurricane levels. I am in Naples, Florida, the west coast of particular concern, vulnerabilities to storm surge, very low-lying areas, Tampa Bay especially. So far, we've been seeing gusts in excess of 60 miles an hour or so and rain for hours. One of the problems with this hurricane is its size. It's the size of a state. So while we all focus on the eye of the storm, you'll see hurricane force winds 70, 75 miles out from that eye. You'll see tropical storm force winds, which are still super destructive, 100 plus miles out. So the reach is great. That's why we're seeing that even though the east coast of Florida was spared, in quotes, that's a defined term because they have been getting hammered by really bad winds and water. John Berman is in Miami. He has been standing through it all night, now all morning. What's the situation there?
We've been having these tropical storm force winds now for hours and hours, Chris. And the National Weather Service said they're experiencing gusts of 100 miles an hour in the high-rise buildings of downtown Miami, telling people to stay away from the windows with those gusts of 100 miles an hour. That's well over hurricane force in the downtown area. And of course, there are those cranes that everyone's concerned about in the city as well, more than 20 of them. Now, Miami-Dade County is a county of 2.5 million people. The emergency management just put out a notice saying they will not respond to 911 calls anymore. There are no rescues happening right now because the winds are so strong. And remember, that's in a county of 2.5 million people. So many affected by that right now. So many people here who need to hunker down. The wind, just one of the concerns. Storm surge, that may be the story of this entire storm all across the Florida Peninsula. Here in Miami, they're expecting a surge of 3 to 6 feet. I think we're starting to see it right now, Chris. These docks behind me, you were out here yesterday. The water does lap up over them at high tide. We're 2 hours from high tide right now, and they are completely submerged. If the water were to come up another 4 feet or so, it would be over where we're standing right now, and that would be a serious concern. We would then move. That's what people are watching. That's why there were the evacuations here in the downtown Miami area. Of course, out there in Miami Beach, it's even worse. So that's the situation here in Miami. Let's go over, I believe, to Tampa and CNN's Anderson Cooper. Anderson.
Yeah, John, obviously a very different situation, but a taste of what you've been seeing in Miami, and particularly Miami Beach, that Kyung La has been reporting on all morning. That's a taste of what is to come here and more. Tampa, which thought a couple of days ago that they were not going to be getting hit as hard as Miami Beach. Woke up to a very different reality yesterday morning when that storm moved west. Late last night, as you know by now, the storm even moved a little farther west, which may sound like good news for Tampa because originally it was going to come right up, barreling straight toward Tampa. Now a few miles out to the west. It's actually worse news because it means that Tampa is in that northeast quadrant of the storm, and that storm surge very likely to enter into Tampa Bay and up through the inlets here throughout Tampa. One of the things that makes Tampa such a beautiful city. This is the Hillsborough River, where we are. Later today, we are expecting to see. Right now, as the winds are moving counterclockwise, those tropical storm winds, those hurricane storm winds moving counterclockwise, the water's actually going out. Later today, that water's going to be coming back in. Let's check in with Chad Myers in the Weather Center. Chad, just explain where this storm is right now and what folks here on the West Coast are going to be expecting in the hours ahead.
Absolutely. The storm has now moved over the lower Keys. It's now back into Florida Bay. Florida Bay is a warm body of water. There's a lot of lobsters in there, freshwater, warm water lobsters. And as the storm moved to the north of there, you think, oh, wow, great, it's going to hit the land here. Well, this is the Everglades. It's not really land. Miami, you are not going to be in the clear until the center gets here, your closest approach. So you still have more hours of worsening weather to go, even though you think you're done. You're not. Fort Pierce and these bands coming on shore here as well. This storm really did punch through Cudjoe Key, Summerland Key, and Big Pine Key. This is where it is now, just exiting there. You're getting the backside of the eye. Let me take you to what this looks like right on the ground. Here is Key West. Key West, at least 120 miles per hour here as the storm wrapped around. Back up the Keys here. There's only one road in and one road out, making landfall at Cudjoe Key. Lots of little residences here. Also very big damage through Ramrod, Little Torch, and also Big Pine Key. We also have all of these little key deer that run around through here. To the next spot, a 7-mile bridge. And this is what they're worried about. Maybe not so much the bridge, but the infrastructure on the bridge. Water is ripping under this area right through now. And then one more spot to the north of here up into Marathon. Marathon catching the water here, running right through Jewfish Creek and out. I can't imagine how fast the water is running right through here. That could also cause damage to the infrastructure of the bridge, because we could be washing things away, washing the bottom of the bridge away, those little stanchions that hold the bridge up, and then all of a sudden the Keys are cut off. The rain goes all the way to Jacksonville. The rain is all the way up the East Coast, and so is the surge. We talk about this surge. It's going to surge on this side maybe 2 to 4 feet, but the bigger surge will be to the west, right where you are, in Fort Myers, in Naples, in Cape Coral. Those are the areas that you need to be above ground, above sea level by more than 10 to 15 feet, because that's where that surge is. And then eventually on up toward Birmingham, but that's irrelevant at this point in time. The surge goes this way. Naples, what you're going to experience in the next few hours, if you're not doing it right now, the water is going to go out. You're going to push away. You're going to be 3 feet down. You're going to have a negative surge. And you're going to think, oh, there goes the storm. It's over. Absolutely not. Your surge is on the backside of this. Kind of because of the way it's hitting the west side, not the east side, the surge is on the wrong side of the eye. It's on the backside, and it is going to be tremendous, 10 to 15 feet. So be ready for that. Anderson.
Chad, a lot to look for in the hours ahead. It is going to be a very difficult day for an awful lot of people, for millions of people all across Florida. We're going to continue to follow this very closely. Brian Todd is in West Palm Beach. Brian, what's the situation there?
Anderson, a real intensification of the conditions here just over the past hour. The wind has really intensified here to almost hurricane strength. And what is adding to the danger here is we have been under tornado warnings just about all day. We're under one right now. And we're told by our CNN weather team that pop-up tornadoes are going to be a threat all day long. We've got to hang on to these railings just to walk around here. We just got pelted with another burst right now. You can see these palm trees here under strain. We'll try to walk along this railing, but we've all got to hang on here. Over here is an illustration of the real danger here in Palm Beach. Debris is flying all over the place. These trees are under severe strain. We've had palm fronds flying around, and we've had to look up constantly to try to dodge them. Power lines, like that one over there, are in real danger right now. We just talked to a city official who said the fire battalion is warning there are going to be zones now that they are not going to be able to respond to. What we're told, Anderson, is that we're on the dirty side of this hurricane, meaning the upper right-hand quadrant where the wind is now pushing in from the east, and that really starts to spur tornadic activity. Tornadoes are going to be our issue all day long. Pop-up tornadoes are going to threaten us all day long. So that is another threat here. This is where much of the energy, the wind energy from the hurricane, is hitting now in West Palm Beach. It's really intense here, and we've also had some very intense rain bands hit us in the last few minutes. So I'm going to throw it to you, John Berman. I'm told I should throw it to you where you are in Miami. I know you've got the intense hurricane strength winds there. Sure feels like it's hitting up here right now too.
Yep. Yeah, Brian, hard to operate, hard to move, hard to hear, hard to do anything in conditions like this with the winds pounding like they are again. In the high rises here in Miami, they've had gusts of 100 miles an hour. More than 500,000 people without power in Miami-Dade alone. More than 1 million people over southern Florida as a whole. As bad as it is right here where I am in Miami, this is downtown Miami. You look out over there, you can't see it because it's raining so hard and the soup is so thick here. But Miami Beach is out there, and that's where I want to go to Kyung Wha, who is just getting pounded all morning out there. Kyung, tell us what it's like right now.
Well, John, as it happens in a hurricane, our electronics are starting to go down as things get waterlogged. Conditions are starting to deteriorate here, as I'm sure they are where you are. I want to give you a look of what it looks like here in Miami Beach. And it looks bad, yes, but I need to tell you that if you go right over that berm to the beach, it's even worse. The wind gusts there are even stronger. There are very, very few people on the street. We've seen a couple of storm chasers, and that is the good news, because Miami Beach police and fire say they cannot rescue people. If you try to come out here, if you have not evacuated, if you have not heeded the mandatory evacuation order, you are on your own. They did try to help people throughout the evening, but eventually they simply had to stop. What we are seeing as far as the storm surge, nothing. And that's very, very good news for this city, because the concern was that there would be a 5-foot storm surge, but so far that has not arrived. A big concern here is flooding, but right now what we're mainly dealing with are these winds. Entire trees are being completely bent over. We're seeing street signs fall over, and then intermittently it becomes very difficult to stand, and certainly it is absolutely unsafe to be on these roads if you're driving. So at some point they were concerned about people trying to come back here to Miami Beach. Do not be out today if you can. John, Chris.
Kyung, I'll take it. Thank you very much. Stay safe. We are in Naples, Florida, and this is a good demonstration between the radar and the real. Do you see the map on your screen right now? That big red ball in the middle is obviously the eye and the most intense winds. Now, if you look above it, the top part and to the left, you'll start seeing these red flashes. This is what happens with those red flashes. We're getting gusts here well in excess of 60 miles an hour or so, and just big bands of rain punishing this area. And this is that West Coast dilemma, which is you have an already very low-lying area that can't take much water, but as we were being shown by the meteorologist, Allison Chinchar, that the storm surge is going to come back with a vengeance on that Gulf side. Right now you're seeing it on the east coast of Florida, and we're actually seeing the water start to withdraw on the western side. Why? Well, that's energy absorption, right? The hurricane moves counterclockwise. It's going to take energy from one side, distribute it to the other. That's going to reverse as it comes through this area, and the flood potential of the storm surge here is the main fear. And the reason for that is the wind gets the headlines. The wind is the spectacle. The wind gives you the miles an hour. But it is the water that wins. It is the water that is deadly. The #1 cause of death in a hurricane is water. Okay, so we're getting a little bit of a glimpse into the future here. We still ain't seen nothing yet on the west coast of Florida. Where they are getting hammered is Key West. That's where this storm made landfall in Key Largo, the key closest to Florida. That's where Bill Weir is. He has been chronicling what the people down there are about and their rugged individualism. He saw some horrible storm conditions this morning, and now at least he's able to have his jacket off. That's a good sign. Bill, what's it like now? I see some sunshine behind you.
Well, no, I gave up on the parka. It didn't matter. It might as well be a little more breezy out here. But we moved over to the other side of our shelter carport here. We're looking at the bay side of Key Largo up at the top of the Keys. But I'm reading these reports. The Miami Herald just reported that everything in Key West is underwater. Quote, everything. There are reports out of the shelters in Marathon Key, where one man died of natural causes overnight in that shelter. They're running low on food, having to raid the cafeteria of the school that they're sheltered in there. We're getting admonitions from the authorities, Monroe County, reminding people not to run your generator inside because the power is out for this entire archipelago. Common sense things, if it seems like the storm has ended, it probably means the eye is over you. Stay inside, because they could get squirrely in a heartbeat now. But I'm just trying to imagine where we did our final Friday night live shot as the exodus was starting to trickle down north on US 1. There was this improvised car lot at Cudjoe Key where people parked their cars as they left or as they tried to shelter on what is a mountaintop in the Keys, 16, 17 feet above sea level, right next to the bridge. That is exactly where Irma came ashore. No telling what became of those vehicles, and hopefully nobody was riding it out in that area there. We've been talking to our sailor friends here on Key Largo. Aside from some tiki huts blowing around, some plywood blowing around, they're all safe. Their boats are still moored for the most part. I did see some pictures out of some boats down in Key West that are just broken and sinking. So as this thing winds down, Chris, we're going to be able to venture out and really get an assessment of the damage. And since this is the strongest storm to hit these Keys in 57 years, since Donna, 57 years ago today, the devastation is sure to be historic.
Yeah, and of course it was Donna, which was terribly devastating for the Keys back in 1960. Reports of hundreds of people who lost their lives there. Obviously, the technology is very different now. The warnings are very different now. People are far better prepared. We'll continue to check in with Bill Weir and other folks who are writing things out throughout the Keys, where we are just now getting reports of the situation there. A lot ahead. Our coverage continues in a moment.